Hi everyone, so if you caught me yesterday I was talking about fibromyalgia and I was talking about managing fatigue in fibromyalgia and discussed the idea that there are four things that you need to focus on which are the cornerstones for managing fatigue. They are nutrition, pacing, something else, rest and recovery, and appropriate exercise. And I said that I would do a little live thing for each of those, and this is the second of those. So if you want to look at nutrition, look back down my timeline, you'll see it was there yesterday. And if you want to know about pacing, then you're in the right place, because that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to bundle rest into pacing, but I'm not going to talk about sleep. I'm going to do sleep as a second one. And the reason for that is because there's some commonality between pacing and what I would generally consider as non-sleep rest, which makes it more sense to talk about together. So, in order to understand how this works and why it's important to pace and how to pace, it's important to understand what we're actually trying to do, and you need to understand how your nervous system works. So I'm going to start with a little primer on this is how your nervous system works. So your nervous system consists of various bits, but we're interested in the central nervous system. Now, anatomically, your central nervous system is your brain and your spinal cord, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that this is like the HQ for your body. All the important stuff goes on in your central nervous system. Now, some of the stuff that happens in your nervous system, your central nervous system, you know about. It's conscious things. Things like, oh, I'm going to wave my hand. Oh, look, I waved my hand. Amazing. Things like thoughts and that sort of thing, and that kind of processing happens in your central nervous system. I'm not interested in that. That's not what we're going to talk about. I'm interested in what we call the autonomic nervous system. Now, this is the stuff that you don't have direct control over, although you can, as you'll learn later, influence it by tapping in or hacking your systems, and that's what we're going to be learning how to do. Now, your autonomic nervous system controls things like your heart rate and your reflexes and how your hormones are released and all that sort of thing. And it's good it does that automatically, because if you were going around going, right, I'm going to have to release a few milligrams of adrenaline now, you would need a brain like the size of a house. We don't need to think about those things. They happen in the background all the time. Now, yesterday I mentioned central sensitization, which I still can't say a day later, which is unfortunate. Now, central sensitization refers to a hair trigger, if you like, on our autonomic nervous system. And central sensitization is one of the core things which is believed to be important in fibromyalgia. Now, your autonomic nervous system, sometimes people talk about it in being two modes. It's not really a mode, but basically there are two directions that your autonomic system, nervous system can work in. There's the sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for basically getting you fired up. It's the 4 F's, which is fight, flight, fright and mating. And it's all the stuff like adrenaline gets surging through your body. You start to get more focused on particular things. Blood is diverted from your digestive system to your muscles where you're going to need it. Your sympathetic nervous system is about survival. It's about making it through to the next day. And it's super important, because if we didn't have that, we wouldn't be here. Our ancestors wouldn't be here. They'd have been eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or something. I don't know. Don't come at me for that. I'm not an archaeology, ancient history type person, but I do know that if you didn't have a sympathetic nervous system, you'd just basically be a bit of a pudding just sitting there getting eaten. So it's a good thing. We like it. The parasympathetic nervous system is the counterbalance to that, and that's responsible. We sometimes refer to it as rest and digest. When your nervous system is biased towards your parasympathetic nervous system, what's happening, my dogs are going crazy, what's happening is that your body is repairing and all the maintenance is going on. Your digestive system is working properly, your muscles are repairing, you're healing, your immune system is optimised, and that's good times. So you need to have a balance of both of these things. Now, what we tend to find in people with fibromyalgia is that they are chronically stuck in a bias towards their sympathetic nervous system. And what that means is that their bodies have high levels of stress hormones all the time. Their cognitive and their thinking is going to be focused towards just getting through to the next moment, so you don't have time to kind of sit back and process. Your immune system isn't working so well because all of the unnecessary stuff, the background tasks, get shut down with a focus being on survival. And when this happens in the long term with no break, it causes all kinds of effects on the body. It's really very detrimental. So what we want to do with someone with fibromyalgia is nudge their bias back towards parasympathetic a little bit more. We want to encourage the body to rest and digest, and it's not always automatically slipping back into that mode when it should. You can think of it as being a bit like your autonomic nervous system has a fire alarm in it, and that fire alarm is going off all the time. There's nothing on fire, it's just broken. But that noise is still there, and it's still annoying, and it's just as annoying whether there's a fire or there's not a fire. So what we need to do is we need to shut down that alarm. And to do that, there are a few things we can do. One of those things is being wary of not allowing the stressors or the triggers in the body to be happening, to reduce the amount of impact or reduce the need for the body to shift into a sympathetic nervous system. As an aside here, I keep mentioning about stress, and I want to be really clear here. When I say stress, I'm not talking about sort of anxiety, psychological stress. I'm talking about anything that takes a toll on the body. So that could be anxiety, but it could also be things like intense exercise or illness. So it's anything that makes the body have to work harder, almost. That's what I'm referring to when I say stress. So reducing stressors is one useful thing we can do, but it's not something that's practical to do all the time, and it's not the only thing that we need to do. The other thing we need to do is to make sure that we encourage parasympathetic nervous system activity, and there are various ways we can do that. So now I'm going to move into talking about what I refer to as rest, the non-sleep rest. So it's really important for everybody, and it's when I had sort of standard PT clients before I started specialising in chronic illness, it was still something I focused on a lot, is the idea that everybody needs to take time during their day to reset their nervous system and to have a parasympathetic nervous system focus. And my recommendation when I did the Free Living Fitness plan is that we start to build in 10 minutes a day at a time. Some people may find that they need more than that. But that 10 minutes is just focused on relaxing. And there's loads of ways you can do this. People always go for meditation, and then people are like, oh, meditation, that sounds a little bit woo. But there's lots of things that we could be referring to when we talk about meditation. It could just be mindfulness. Apps like Headspace are really good for that. They're just little recorded things that you just sit there quietly and listen to them and think about the things that they tell you to think about. There's also the more serious more like sort of yoga levels of meditation. Some people like meditation that includes chanting and things. If that's your thing, that's your thing. But when I talk about meditation, what I'm really referring to is making a conscious effort to be quiet in your mind. And that doesn't mean necessarily blanking your mind, although there is a style of meditation that is about trying to focus on nothingness. Most Western people struggle with that. It's not built into our culture. Mindfulness meditation is a little bit more accessible for a Western mind, and what that basically means is sitting back and watching what's happening in your head and going, oh, I'm having a thought about that, okay, that thing is distracting me, I'm just going to let it go. And it's about sort of taking a moment to look back and audit what's going on in your head. So you can do that for 10 minutes or so. Another option is breathing exercises, simple breathing. If you have a smartwatch or a fitness watch like a Fitbit or something like that, they almost now all have a stop, rest and breathe app on them, where you literally just click it and then it says breathe in, breathe out, that sort of thing. Some people find that useful. Personally, and as an aside which is quite useful to our topic, I can't do these. I have autonomic dysfunction and my breathing rate is ridiculously low. So when they tell me to breathe, it's too fast and I feel like I'm hyperventilating. But if the pace works for you, it works for you. But you can also, you don't need an app to tell you how to breathe. You can practice some basic breathing exercises like you might learn in yoga. You can simply practice some breathing exercises where you count to 4 as you breathe in and count to 6 as you breathe out and try and slow it right down. Just sitting quietly for 10 minutes and doing that is great. You could also just listen to some relaxation music. There's loads of stuff on YouTube, stuff like ASMR and binaural beats stuff. There are relaxation tracks and there are sleep tracks. I'll talk about sleep tracks when we do sleep because we're not doing that now, not allowed. So just sitting and listening to relaxing music for 10 minutes is relaxing and is an excellent way to break. Colouring is getting really popular nowadays for adults, and they've actually looked into it and found that sitting there and colouring in is a really good way of resetting your nervous system to a parasympathetic bias. Just does. So some craft things like that work. Things that are not relaxing, things that are not technically a proper relaxer, things like watching TV or playing video games. Although there are also some video games now which are very relaxing, things like Animal Crossing, which is basically gaming ASMR. Watching television is considered too stressful. My occupational therapist told me I'm not allowed to watch television as a relaxing thing. I'm allowed to watch it, I don't have time, but because watching things and following stories and getting excited and getting invested in things, that is stimulating your nervous system. We want to take it all right down. So the first thing is building in these 10-minute breaks, and I get people started on just doing one 10-minute break a day because for some people that is enough to try and handle. I want to move on now and talk about pacing. So pacing links in with this idea of taking in your parasympathetic breaks, but it's looking at the structure of your day and how you do things. So if you have fibromyalgia, you probably have good days and bad days. Everyone has good days and bad days. But it's really tempting on your good days to get everything done. And what happens is you wake up feeling good and vital and going, I can do all the things, and you do all the things, and then the next day you're exhausted because you've done too much. The idea of pacing is that you spread your tasks out. The Mayo Clinic have a recommendation where they say that you should do the same amount of things. So you expend the same amount of energy on a good day or a bad day, which means that you have to plan your days to be something that you can access on a bad day. When I say a bad day, I'm not talking about a flare, because a flare basically is nothing. We're trying to avoid flares. We're pacing through our non-flare days. So the idea being that if you do the stuff on your bad day and you get the things done, you've been productive, you've done okay. If you've got a good day, you do the same amount of stuff, but you've not pushed yourself to capacity. And that might leave you with a little bit more for the next day. So it helps to even things out. Now, in reality, that's not necessarily going to work because all of us have things to work around. And you can look at how to deal with that healthily. Now, when I used to teach full-time for a living, I basically threw myself at work all week and crashed every weekend and holiday. And I spent all of the school holidays and all of the weekends having blinding migraines because I pushed myself too far. That's not a thing to do. But if you have a busy day in the week, you might deliberately plan to have a quiet day the next day. Ideally, though, you want to be mixing up your tasks throughout your day, and you can get pacing diaries to see how you're doing this, and you can start to assess what's going on. Most NHS trusts have a pacing diary that they use for chronic fatigue, and you can download them and have a look at them. If you're under the care of an occupational therapist, they will probably be able to provide you with one. And what a pacing diary does is that you mark off through the day what you're doing. Are you doing something that's high intensity, low intensity? Are you resting? Are you sleeping? And you colour it in, and it looks very beautiful, and you can see the blocks of what you're doing. And the aim is to start breaking it up a little bit. So what I like to do in my days is I mix up high intensity and low intensity tasks. I mix up physical versus mental tasks so I can recover physically while I'm doing something else. But it is still important to remember, however, that something that is physically stressing and something that is mentally stressing are both stimulating your sympathetic nervous system. So you can't just go, oh, I did some really intense admin work and then I went out and did some exercise, and because of that the exercise was a break from the admin, because neither of those were a break for your sympathetic nervous system. But it's a good thing to mix those up anyway. After an intense activity, you take a rest. And those 10-minute rest activities are great to slot in there. I think that the rest periods serve you best when they come after an intensive period, because what they then do is you've done your intense exercise or your stressing activity, and your sympathetic nervous system is very heavily involved in that, and then you take a break and you take it back down. So you are deliberately resetting yourself back down from that high point. So pacing is really super useful. You should definitely do it. It's useful for anybody to be thinking about how they're managing their time, but with chronic conditions like fibromyalgia or anything which causes chronic fatigue, then taking time out and looking at actually how you're expending your energy and how you're spreading out the tasks you're doing and how you are resetting after those tasks is really useful for helping you with having more energy, more vitality and less flares in the long term. I hope you find that useful. I'm going to come back later in the week and we're going to talk about sleep and we're going to talk about exercise. So I hope I will see you then.